Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're taking a deep dive into Think Straight, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. It's by Darius Foroux.
Oh,
Have you heard of this one?
I have. Yeah, it's a good one.
It's like this really practical guide for improving your thinking, almost like a workout routine.
It is. It's so refreshing to see a book that just cuts through the fluff and gives you actionable advice.
Totally. And we're going to be pulling out the best tips and tricks so that you guys can put them to use right away.
And there are some pretty unconventional ideas in here that challenge the typical self-help stuff, so get ready.
I love that. Okay, so the book starts off with this story about William James, a psychologist who was really struggling with a serious depression.
Oh, wow.
He realized he had this epiphany that, while we can't always control what thoughts come into our heads, we can control which ones we choose to focus on.
Oh, that's like a total game changer, right? Instead of feeling like your thoughts are running the show, you realize you have the power to choose, what you're going to give your attention to.
It's powerful. And it's really the core idea of the whole book.
Exactly. The quality of your thoughts really does shape your reality. I mean, it sounds simple, but when you really think about it, it's profound.
It is. So then how do we upgrade our thoughts?
Well, Thoreau argues that, honestly, a lot of our thinking is just chaotic.
Oh, yeah.
It's unproductive. He even gives this example from his own life when he moved to London and was dealing with a housing crisis. Total nightmare trying to find a place to live.
You can imagine.
Yeah, and he realized that, all the overthinking he was doing about the situation was actually making it worse. It just created more stress and made it harder to make a decision.
It's like when you overthink, you psych yourself out.
Exactly. So Think Straight is all about, replacing that mental clutter with clear, focused thoughts that actually help you move forward.
Okay, I'm all about clear thinking. But then the book kind of threw me for a loop when it started talking about all these cognitive biases. It's like, whoa, our brains are kind of messed up.
Yeah, right.
These biases are like mental shortcuts our brains use, and sometimes they lead us to make really bad decisions.
It's true. One classic example is confirmation bias, where we basically just search for information that confirms what we already believe, even if it's totally wrong.
Which happens all the time, right?
All the time. Think about it. How often have you seen people just dismiss information because it doesn't fit with their existing views?
All the time. How do we even make good decisions when we're bombarded with so much information and our brains are playing tricks on us?
Right. That's where the book emphasizes the importance of filtering. I mean, our brains have to use these mental shortcuts called heuristics just to process everything.
Makes sense.
They can be helpful, but we need to be aware of how they can also lead us astray.
Okay, so filtering. Got it. And then four throws in this idea of pragmatism.
Oh, yeah, pragmatism. I love this.
Focusing on what actually works in the real world.
Right. It's about cutting through the noise and asking, does this actually produce results? And he applies this to so many areas like managing money.
Forget all the complicated financial advice. He gives these 5 simple rules. Earn, save, invest, simplify, and resist.
I love those. And the resist one really hit home for me.
Yeah. It's resist the urge to buy stuff you don't need, it's a constant battle.
It is. But when you resist those impulses, you gain so much more control over your finances and, honestly, your life.
Totally. Okay, one thing I really appreciated about Think Straight is that it challenges a lot of conventional wisdom. Remember the whole pros and cons list thing?
Oh, yeah, he's not a fan of those.
He thinks they oversimplify things, especially when it comes to big decisions.
Especially for big decisions. You can't make a pros and cons list about whether to stay in a relationship or not.
Right. That's way too complex.
Exactly. He encourages us to think outside the box, to consider options that might not be on that simple list.
It's we need to get out of that either-or mindset.
Exactly. He uses this visual of a maze. If you're stuck in a maze, you might miss the most direct route just because you're limited by the walls.
Oh, I love that.
You have to step back, see the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy.
Yep.
Okay, confession time. I tend to be someone who, glosses over details.
Really?
But this book really made me realize, how important they are.
Oh, for sure.
He tells this story about losing a $150,000 business deal because of a tiny error in an email. He sent the wrong contract.
Oh my gosh, that's brutal.
It's details matter.
They do. And it's not just about avoiding mistakes. It's about being present and focused in everything we do.
So true. And on a more personal level, the book shares this really moving story about Foroux's grandmother, who had a lot of regrets about things she didn't do in her life.
That's always tough to hear.
Yeah, it really inspired him to live a life without regrets, to pursue his passions and focus on experiences rather than material things.
That's so powerful, you know? Life's too short to be filled with what ifs. We need to just go for it, pursue our dreams, and create those memories.
Absolutely. And that leads into this idea of like living in the present moment, which is a big theme in Think Straight.
Mm.
He even suggests that holding on to physical mementos of the past can sometimes prevent us from fully embracing the now.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, are those old concert tickets and photos really serving us, or are they just clutter?
It's about making space for new experiences and letting go of what no longer serves us.
Makes sense. So we've talked about like thinking clearly, thinking outside the box, paying attention to details, letting go of the past. But what's the end goal of all this?
Well, the book suggests it's all about achieving inner calm.
Ah, yes, inner peace. But like he doesn't make it seem like this mystical thing that's impossible to attain.
Exactly.
It's something we can cultivate through practice, through being more mindful.
And he emphasizes that we don't need anything external to achieve it, you know? It's not about buying the right yoga mat or going on some fancy retreat.
It's about developing that mindset that allows you to experience peace no matter what's happening around you.
I love that. Okay, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
There's so much more.
So much more to unpack from Think Straight. We'll be back in part 2 to explore even more insights. Stay tuned.
Can't wait. You know, one of the things that I really liked about this book is that it doesn't just tell you to think better.
Right?
Like it actually gives you tools
Yeah,
to like actually do it.
I know.
It's not just about having good thoughts. It's about how to turn those thoughts into actions, you know?
Totally. And one of the things that he talks about is like using habits and systems.
Yes. Systems. It's like taking the thinking out of it.
I know.
You know,
Right.
he uses this example of exercise. Like instead of constantly debating with yourself about whether or not you should work out, you create a system. Like you have a specific time, a specific place, a specific routine.
Yeah.
And then you just do it.
Yeah.
That way you don't even have to think about it.
Like you're putting your good decisions on autopilot.
Yes, exactly. I love that.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about like thinking clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And this book also kind of challenges us to be more unconventional in our thinking.
Totally. Like question all those beliefs that we've just been like holding on to forever. You
Yeah.
know? Especially when it comes to making decisions.
Mm.
He wants us to move past that either thinking like this or that. He uses this great metaphor of a maze.
Oh, tell me about the maze.
Yeah, so if you're stuck in a maze, right, you might miss the most direct route to your goal.
Okay.
Just because you're like limited by the walls of the maze, right?
Yeah, you're right.
But what if you could just like see the maze from above?
Ooh,
You would have a totally different perspective, right?
that's so smart.
So that's what he's encouraging us to do, to like zoom out and see the bigger picture and consider these possibilities that might not be immediately obvious.
That's awesome.
Sometimes the best solutions are the ones that no one's even thought of yet, you know?
Love that.
Oh,
Okay, so we've talked about thinking clearly,
yeah.
thinking unconventionally,
Mm-hmm.
but this book also reminds us that it's important to know when not to overthink.
Yes. This is so important. Release the mind.
Release the mind.
Just find ways to quiet the mental chatter.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's through meditation, spending time in nature, being creative,
Yeah.
whatever works for you,
Yeah.
just give your mind a break.
Yeah.
He tells this funny story about how he had writer's block.
No.
And he was like trying so hard to like force himself to write,
Mhm.
but he wasn't giving his mind any time to rest.
Okay.
So it's a good reminder that like our minds need downtime.
Yeah.
Just like our bodies do.
Totally.
And sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to actually step away from it
Step away.
for a while and let your subconscious mind kind of work its magic in the background.
That's a great tip. What resonated with you most about his approach to like achieving inner calm?
You know, I think what I appreciated most is how accessible he makes it sound.
Okay.
Like, it's not this thing that's only for like monks or yogis who've been meditating for years. It's something that we can all cultivate
Yeah.
through consistent effort
Yeah.
and by being more present and mindful in our daily lives, you know?
Yeah. And he also really emphasizes that, like, we don't need anything external to achieve that, right?
No, it's not about buying a fancy yoga mat or anything like that.
Right.
It's an inside job.
Yeah, it's like cultivating that sense of contentment and gratitude.
Yes. Gratitude for what you already have, you know?
So true. Okay, there was one chapter in the book that I was not expecting at all, but I found it super insightful.
Tell me.
It was one about drawing your thoughts.
Oh, yeah. Drawing, it sounds kind of weird.
I know.
But he actually makes a really good case for it.
Right.
Like, our brains are wired for visual thinking, and drawing can help us to break free from the limits of language. You know,
What?
it's like you're tapping into a different part of your brain.
Oh, that's so cool.
And that can lead to, like, a whole new level of creativity and understanding.
I love that. He even mentions Leonardo da Vinci, right, who was famous for his visual thinking skills.
Oh, yeah, Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
He was a genius.
It's like a reminder that some of the greatest thinkers throughout history have used visual tools to enhance their thinking.
Yeah, for
I
real.
love that. Okay, so the book ends on this really powerful message about thinking beyond ourselves.
Yes. Thinking bigger, you know?
Uh-huh.
It's not just about us.
Right.
It's about using our thinking to make a positive impact on the world.
Totally.
He actually shares this really inspiring story about William James,
Oh, yeah.
who's like one of the founders of pragmatism,
Right.
and how he supported his friend, another philosopher, Charles Peirce, who was really struggling financially at the time.
Uh-huh.
And it's just such a beautiful example of using your success and influence to lift other people up, you know?
I love that.
It's not just about, like, what's in it for me. It's
Yeah.
about how can I use my thinking to help others.
I love that. It's like, what is the purpose of all this thinking that we're doing?
Right. Is it just to, like, make ourselves rich and successful?
Yeah.
Or is there something more to it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And he really suggests that it's about more than that.
Yeah.
It's about creating something
Yeah.
of lasting value that benefits others.
I love that.
And that true fulfillment comes not just from personal achievement, but from making a positive difference in the world.
What's a good takeaway?
It is.
We're going to dive more into that in part 3 of this deep dive.
Yeah.
So we were talking about this idea of thinking beyond ourselves and, how that can lead to a more meaningful life.
Yeah, it's a really powerful concept.
It is.
But it's not just, some fluffy feel-good
Right.
thing. It can actually be a huge motivator. Like, instead of always asking what's in it for me, we start to think about how we can use our thinking to contribute to something bigger than ourselves.
I love that shift in perspective.
Yeah, and you know what? The book argues that it can make your life more fulfilling, more impactful.
Really?
Yeah, it's not about neglecting your own needs,
Right.
but recognizing that true happiness
Uh-huh.
often comes from making a positive difference
Yeah.
in the world around you.
I love that.
Yeah, Foroux even talks about how striving to create something that outlasts you, whether it's through your work, your relationships, your contributions to society,
Yeah.
that can give your life a deeper sense of meaning.
Like a legacy
Yeah, like a
that
legacy.
you leave behind.
So true. Now, the book doesn't pretend that life is always easy.
Oh, no, not at all.
We all face challenges, right?
Absolutely. Setbacks and moments of doubt.
Oh, yeah.
But even in those tough times, Forough reminds us that we have a choice
Okay.
in how we respond.
How we think about it.
Exactly. Like,
Mm.
do we dwell on what we can't control?
Or do we focus on what we can?
Right.
And it all starts with our thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Like, our thoughts have such a powerful influence on our emotions and our actions.
That's true.
So if we can learn to focus on more positive, more constructive thoughts, we can actually handle those tough times with more resilience.
So important. And, a big takeaway for me from Think Straight is this idea of self-awareness.
Oh, self-awareness, that's huge.
It is.
He really emphasizes understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, your
Yeah.
values, what you want,
Yeah.
what truly motivates you,
Yeah.
and then making sure your actions are, like, in line with those core beliefs.
I love it.
It's like walking the walk, not just talking the talk,
Totally.
He actually shares a personal story about a past relationship that ended because he and his partner just had different values,
Oh, wow.
And it just highlights how important it is to be true to yourself.
That's tough.
Yeah, it is tough.
Yeah.
But, being authentic is so crucial for happiness and for healthy relationships.
Totally. And speaking of, making choices, Forough gives some really practical advice on decision-making.
Oh, yeah, especially for those, split-second decisions.
Oh, no, those are the hardest.
Those are the ones that get you in trouble. He actually suggests taking a pause before you react impulsively.
That's so hard to do.
It is. It's like, give yourself a moment to think things through,
Yeah.
He tells this funny story about feeling pressured to commit to a business trip, months in advance.
Oh.
And then later, he realized the timing was terrible and he wished he hadn't said yes so quickly.
That's the worst.
It is, but it happens to all of us, right? So
Yeah.
it's a good reminder that it's okay to ask for time to consider your options, especially when it comes to commitments that are going to take up a lot of your time and energy, you know?
Right. And he also talks about, like, being mindful of how our decisions might affect others.
Yes. Thinking about those ripple effects,
Uh-huh.
and making sure that your choices are benefiting not just yourself, but the people around you as well.
I love that. It all comes back to that idea of thinking beyond ourselves, right?
It does, full circle.
Full circle. Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on inner calm one more time.
Yeah, it's so important.
It is. It's something so many of us strive for, but often struggle to achieve.
It's a journey for sure.
It is. What are your thoughts on Foroux's approach to finding that sense of peace?
I really appreciate how he breaks it down.
Okay.
Like, he doesn't present it as this, like, unattainable thing.
Right. Yeah.
It's a skill that we can develop
Yeah.
through consistent effort.
Practice.
And practice, yeah. It's about finding little ways to incorporate mindfulness into your everyday life.
Like those little moments.
Yeah, like whether it's taking a few minutes to meditate,
Mm-hmm.
going for a walk in nature,
Yeah.
or even just like taking a few deep breaths before you react to a stressful situation.
That's a good one.
It can make a big difference. And you know what? He also reminds us that we already have everything we need to find that inner peace.
We do.
It's not about seeking external validation or buying a bunch of stuff.
Right.
It's about cultivating contentment and gratitude
Yeah.
for what we already have.
I love that. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Think Straight, I'm feeling really empowered. Empowered and, like, responsible,
I love that.
because we really do have more control over our thoughts
You do.
in our lives than we realize.
And we realize.
But we have to use that power wisely,
Right.
To think not just for ourselves, but for the betterment of the world.
Absolutely. This has been a fantastic deep dive.
I know, I've learned so much.
I have to.
So thanks to Darius Foroux for giving us so much to think about.
Yes. Thank you.
And to you guys, our listeners,
Our amazing listeners.
for joining us on this journey. Keep those mental gears turning and go out there and make good shit happen.